Good evening, comrades. This is Dr. G. I've looked at this the argument made by Bo Herbert and the argument made by these advocates of the Swiss process, and I think there's a lot it leaves a lot to be desired, and for the life of me, I'm still struggling to understand why these comrades of ours are pushing this agenda, literally shoving it down our throats, notwithstanding all the cautionary note that we are putting on up as against this thing. Fundamentally, listen, a process is supported by international community. Um, it does not suffice for us to hear through second or third parties that this is a process supported by the international community. It also does not suffice for us to see this via tweets of high-ranking personalities that this is a process supported by the international community. The international community has an identity. The international community has a physical address, has a structure, has diplomatic arms and means of advocating or making known or making clear their views on issues. When I listened to the presentation made by Alex, I was going to ask him the question when he says that he's receiving seed funding from the Canadian government and is receiving seed funding from the Swiss government. I wanted to specifically ask him, and maybe that was asked and I did not get it. Did the Canadian government specifically give them funds to fund their mediation efforts on this Amazonian conflict? If yes, which arm of the Canadian government disbursed those funds and what were the terms of reference? Has the Swiss government given them funds to fund their efforts in the Amazonian conflict? If yes, which arm of the Swiss government disposed those funds and what were the terms of reference? Because the HD as an NGO, and as I speak under correction, is an entity that typically can have a series of uh, uh, funders that give seed funding. You are an organization that has principles, you have objectives, and you have people that broadly support your ideas and ideals that you're trying to promote, and then they give you funding to say, here, this is funding for you to run your activities. So if the Canadian funding and the Swiss funding they're talking about has been given to HD as an entity to support its broad objectives, that is completely different from saying that these organizations have designated money uh, into the HD port specifically to support the initiative as far as this conflict is concerned. Because if that has been the case, then there should be a contract, a disbursement contract somewhere that has specific terms of use that tells HD director you can use this to buy tickets, but you cannot buy a fridge for yourself or take your girlfriend on holidays. And if any of these leaders have had a look at that contract that comes from the sponsors, it would give us a better idea of what is going on as far as this process is concerned. I was also going to ask him, because the Alex guy that spoke to Chris Anu said that yes, he can guarantee us that there is principled support from the Presidency of the Republic of La République du Cameroon. I was going to ask him, who is he speaking to? Who is his interlocutor? So that we can be able to know for a fact what this is all about. Here's my gut feeling about this. And I say this in support of all the other reservations that have been expressed. My fear is that there is La République money involved in this thing. I've said it before and I'm saying it again. And to the contrary is proven. And of course, we know that as far as anything is attributed to the presidency of the Republic of Cameroon is concerned, we know that that's how they function. They disburse funds for people to be bribed in the field. They disburse funds for people to that is their modus operandi. They would pay for anything they want to get done. Now, my fear is that this is La République funding with a white face. In the form of HD. And there's nothing that any of these people involved in this process have said thus far that can tell us with a certainty that this is not the case. Proof of the matter is that if you look at the way HD is going about this process, they are essentially venturing into spaces that really beats it. They are going into the heart of our revolution, not just the structure of its functioning at a global level, but they are infiltrating the revolution is the right word. Anybody who looks at their modus operandi and what they are doing at the moment would come to the conclusion that these people are infiltrating the revolution. If you get to a point where you have a person with a questionable agenda, questionable mandate, an unclear objective, has access to ground generals, has access to LGA heads, and is seeking to bring them in for a meeting, then we all should know that we are in for deep trouble. So we continue to express caution as far as this thing is concerned. The flags are all up. Everybody is telling these leaders, you are driving us into a difficult position. Stop. The least that these people could do, in all of their zeal to prove that this is a legitimate process, is to take a few steps back and take into account the reservations that are being expressed across the board among our community. That's the least that they can do. Because, by the way, the people who are expressing reservations and reserves are the people that they're claiming to represent. And whatever outcome that's going to come out of them, for it to be legitimate, you will need the endorsement of the same people. So there's no point trying to force this thing down our throat when you are going to go all through to the table and come back and we'll tell you the same things then that we are telling you now. That this process is not legitimate, it is flawed, it's bordering on infiltrating this revolution to destroy it. The credibility of the people involved is questionable, their mandate is not clear, and it's something that must be approached with the caution that is deserved. What it seems to me, when I look at this process, is that HD is it's an NGO that's in the business of conflict resolution. Because the one question I was going to ask Alex very bluntly and forthrightly is, what is in this for you guys? You know, there are no Father Christmases around the world. In the economy, you say there's no free lunch. And anybody who's involved in the process of trying to spend his money is seeking to make money one way or the other. And it's not clear to us at the end of this process, they posing as facilitator and getting us to sign that no one else was facilitate. Essentially, anybody who reads through that would simply understand that they are trying to get a guaranteed contract that can make them to be able to charge a fee for their services. And anybody who is engaged in a process of this nature with the idea of eventually charging a fee, it's not an unbiased facilitator, because they have the incentive of the size of their fee and their eligibility to be paid by the parties involved that moves, that inspires their motivation and informs and influences the way they are going to go about the thing. Said differently, if La République is the one who is going to pay their fees, it definitely means that they cannot structure that process in such a way that it's not going to meet the best interest of La République du Cameroon. So there's a lot of thinking to be done. And there is nothing that says that we should be compelled to use the first negotiator that puts his hand up. In addition to all the other arguments that we have raised about the non-readiness of our own very leaders to get onto the negotiation table. This is being a huge distraction. It's coming at a time when, and I kind of buy into the argument against which this process is being utilized to take the steam and the fire and the pressure away from the Republic of Cameroon, to push it from making the kind of concessions that is supposed to be made, because it's providing an outlet against which they can say that, no, we are committed to this process. This process needs to be given time. It's the same kind of practice like the Grand National Dialogue. You know, what the Grand National Dialogue is for internal policies in Cameroon, the Swiss process is for external diplomacy and the pressure of the international community. Because when people think that there is a process in place, they can make the argument that wait for the process to go through, and that is problematic because it is actually buying time for the Republic to roll out its other strategies on the ground. So this is problematic, and our leaders who are involved in this process must go back to the drawing board. They really need to stop trying to force this thing down our throat and come back and let us have a broad-based consultation about this thing, so that the checks and balances, we tick all the correct boxes, so that we are going back onto a negotiation table. We are going back as one people speaking with one voice. Not that some people go and secure a deal and then come and try to force it on us. And when the rest of us are raising reservations about it, they're trying to make us suggest that we do not master what's the process. The story that Bo Herbert is saying about the one chance of attention in the international community is hogwash. You know, it's BS for what it represents. It's fear mongering. You know, the whole notion of let us rather negotiate now while we have the attention of the international community, or else Biya is going to wage a full-blown war against our people. What has he been doing for the last 3 years? Was that a half-blown war? Or was he exercising himself in the art of warfare? This is total nonsense. I mean, people should stop insulting our intelligence with such half-baked arguments. They should go back to the drawing board and answer the fundamental questions. There are critical questions about our capability to be able to place demands on the negotiating table, which is the argument that has been put forward about strengthening the ground fire to be able to bring us to a place where we can be taken as serious contenders. That seems to be very simple logic that anybody should be able to understand. There's a question of the leadership in jail and their liberation as a precondition for any meaningful negotiation. Now, if HD is going to get involved in a very nuanced mandate, which is not clear who is backing them, it becomes problematic because they are going to cause more harm to the process than do good. Let's rather do things properly and make sure they are properly done. There are very many mediators that can come into this process that are going to secure us a deal. When there was a conflict in the DRC, South Africa mediated. It was through the offices of the president himself. Thabo Mbeki was president at the time. He flew both parties into South Africa, took them on the military naval ship between Kabila and Mobutu, and they trashed their issues. South Africa posed itself as a mediator that was able to facilitate between both parties. And whatever it is that they reached at as a conclusion, they were able to enforce it. So this whole notion of we cannot be getting also to getting an official recommendation from a state party endorsement would be recognizing Ambazonia is bullshit. If Ambazonia is a contender on the ground, if they are a stakeholder and a counterpart in the party, any person who is interested in resolving and wants to deliver a mandate for the resolution must recognize the fact that Ambazonia and its forces, they are a party to this thing. It is way different from giving them recognition as a state. It is fundamental and essential to recognizing the fact that if these people are interested in peace, in silencing the guns and bringing this conflict to an end, they need to talk to these people. That is the logic. That's the argument. Whether they're recognizing them as a state or not recognizing them as a state, it's irrelevant. It's about recognizing them as a stakeholder in the process. If Cameroon government wants to identify a mediator to talk to a stakeholder, Ambazonia is the stakeholder. Whether they are a recognized or an unrecognized state, they are the stakeholder in the conflict that needs to be spoken to. So any kind of international support to this process that seeks to bring about resolution has to start by recognizing the stakeholders. That they are the stakeholders has nothing to do whether you recognize them as a state or not. They're the stakeholders because they are the ones that have responsible, that the other party in the conflict. So this whole notion of we do not want to, it is not in the nature of states to give endorsement or to give a formal written endorsement note is bullshit. HG should stop treating us like kindergarten children. If La République du Cameroon recognizes the importance of finding a solution to the conflict on the ground, they need to recognize who is it that they must negotiate with. And they must give a clear mandate to whoever wants to facilitate that process to tell them that go ahead and negotiate with these people and let us come find a solution to this conflict. It's as simple as daylight. I'm not sure what these people are trying to make sound extremely complicated unnecessarily. So these people should go back to the drawing board. We are interested, and it's to our best interest to get a negotiator, a facilitator that has teeth, that can bring both parties to a position where they are somewhat almost compelled to take into account whatever agreement they get into. Anybody who is trying to facilitate this process who doesn't have the possibility of earning the respect of both sides is really in the wrong business. And if HC is just trying to secure itself a contract that it negotiated in the resolution of conflict in the Amazonian crisis, then they are really not the people we are looking for. They are really in the wrong business and have come at the wrong time because we are not at the space where we have business for NGOs.